Welcome to the Next ChaptHER Podcast, the place to explore, dream, and discover your next chapter. Hosted by professional life coach, educator, and storyteller, Andrea Hecht, this podcast introduces you to a community of inspirational women like you. In each episode, Andrea sits down with amazing women for an in-depth conversation about their journeys toward a life reimagined. From overcoming obstacles to reigniting passion, each story will empower and motivate you to write the next chapter on your own terms. Let go of worry and anxiety while joining Andrea in thought-provoking and entertaining conversations. You won't just learn how these remarkable women overcame hurdles standing between them and success. You'll gain strength, self-confidence, and clarity along the way. Discover new perspectives meant to ignite your fire within. Tune in today for inspiring stories that will help you live a life reimagined, all through the Next ChaptHER Podcast.
Welcome to the Next ChaptHER Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Hecht. I'm very excited to be here today with a dear friend of mine, Chrissy Davenport. Chrissy and I met about, I think it was almost 8 years ago at our town pool. We were both in the baby pool with our kids, and we struck up a conversation, and we've been friends ever since. So welcome, Chrissy.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
And I'm super excited to have you as a guest and focus today's conversation on prioritizing your health and well-being. And I thought that it was very fitting for Chrissy and I to have this conversation because 8 years ago when we met, I was struggling with my own health and some food sensitivities. And it was with Chrissy's guidance that I was able to discover that I had a gluten intolerance. And she helped me on my journey to taking my health and well-being in my own hands. And so I'm excited for Chrissy to be able to share how she does this for herself. And so before we really dive into your journey, Chrissy, I wanted to start and talk about when you were a little girl, what did you dream of becoming?
Oh my gosh, this is so funny because I saw this in your questionnaire and I just sort of skipped over it. It is not a typical response from somebody that you will have on this podcast. It's so fun. I dreamt of working in a crayon factory on an assembly line, just shuffling crayons through. At a very young age, I remember sitting in like Mrs. Oldie's elementary school class and saying, oh my gosh, I don't want to be involved in any type of career that's going to stress me out and make me feel like I'm under pressure. And I watched this video on how crayons were created, and I was like, that's the perfect job for me. Is that not hysterical?
Love it. It is hysterical, and spoiler alert, that is not what you do. However, I'm sure you use a lot of crayons on a daily, maybe not a daily basis, but you have 3 beautiful girls and they are 11 and younger. So I'm sure that you have, that giant box of crayons in your house. Is that true?
That's true. And I will say too, all right, probably 2 lessons that I could take from that is number 1, I am a very visual creative person. So it is what I do day to day. And I would say the creativity comes in play in terms of food creation and food preparation, which is a avenue for which I express myself and my wellness for my own family and for my clients. It's having the knowledge in terms of what these food items and ingredients do in our bodies. But then what's so much fun is I get to play with it and create beautiful presentations that are also delicious. So that's a creativity piece. And then my other passion really is decor. I love home decorating and I love just color and putting things together. So maybe that's where it was all sparked. But then the deeper rooted piece of it that I think is probably very telling is that from a very young age, I think I was so afraid to fail at anything. So I was like, oh, I'll sign up for something that's super easy. I'll work on an assembly line and just throw crayons in a box. Because I think I did, even at a young age, did not like the idea of going into something that was bigger than I was. And that's the complete opposite of what I did. I went into something that was very big. But I think deep down, that's where my heart was. I like that comfort of knowing what I'm doing day in and day out, knowing that it's going to be successful. So
no, that's super interesting. And I asked that question because at times it is something that we dreamed of and people follow that dream. And that at other times when people are struggling to figure out what they want to do next, they can pull on what they, dreamt of when they were younger, and that there are pieces of that you can, use to pull you forward. And it, like you mentioned, there is a small aspect of it that, is telling to your story. So, let's back up for a minute and kind of go back to the beginning of your journey before you were a mother, and kind of talk about your professional journey up to motherhood. Okay.
And important to give me a guideline. How much time do I have? I want to keep it succinct, but also have like a rich conversation.
Whatever you need.
2 minutes?
Whatever you need, however long it takes to kind of give the background of where you kind of started and what led you to where you are today.
Okay. All right. I will say, look, the crayon story, that's my very first memory of like thinking about what I wanted to do when I was older. But I think from a very young age, I loved being in the kitchen with my mom. I never thought it would be a career of mine, but I really did love that. And I always loved science, and I always loved getting to know people. And so you take those three passions from the time I was like 12, and I certainly have utilized those today. But I went through high school, public high school. I was a very like hardworking student, went to college. I went to Brown University and I studied psychology and I played Division I lacrosse. But I had no idea what I wanted to do. I graduated and just felt very overwhelmed by the prospect of having to decide my future, in 2000, like, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Thought about going back to school, but recognized I just needed to take a back seat and just get thrown into like the real world to see what careers were out there. So I ended up taking a job in the city as like a technology recruiter. It was a very short-lived position, but I think I gained some understanding of what I liked and what I didn't like about that role. And then from there, I moved on to pharmaceutical companies for 2.5 years. And I did some pharma sales, which again, it would make sense because I really enjoyed, I'm a hard worker, I'm self-motivated. I like seeing the fruit of my labor, which brought me into sales. I like the science background of pharmaceuticals, but I didn't love that industry. Ultimately went to work for Johnson & Johnson, Ethicon and Ethicon Endosurgery for the remaining of my corporate career, which was about 10 years long. And there I really discovered a lot about business and myself and life skills. While I was at J&J, I served many roles. I was in the operating room in sales, consulting with surgeons and nurses. I did that for a few years, went back and got my MBA at Seton Hall through J&J, and really loved the overall management and leadership piece, which then I exercised as a manager at the company. And I had a hiring role and I trained individuals and I was in the field with them. And I did that for the majority of my time. And it was a really fun time for me. And it was during that time that I met Craig, and he was my husband. And we quickly fell in love, got engaged, got married, 9 months later had a baby. And it just felt like a whirlwind. But I will say there was a tipping point where it seemed like everything was going well, right? Without really putting a lot of thought to it, pieces came together and brought me to a career that I just was like, oh, wow, this is really cool. I'm exercising my gifts and skills. And it just sort of fell into place. I didn't know where that recruiting job would take me. But then 12 years later, I was in a role at J&J, which I really loved. However, I did get let go from my company when I was 7 months pregnant with Maya, and it was my first child. They had a major reorganization of the company, and it was like, you know what I recognized? I certainly had this idol. And I don't know if you use that word in your like ordinary day-to-day, but for me, an idol is something that you put so much focus on in your life, and you think that that thing can ultimately bring you joy and happiness. And now looking back, I'm like, gosh, my idol was really my job, my career, where I saw myself in the world. And I put so much emphasis on that what happened was like over the course of a year, I became a new mom. When I got let go, I applied for an even more aggressive position with a consulting company, took that job, had a new baby, was trying to manage a home. And guess what? That job did not bring me happiness and fulfillment and joy. In fact, it brought me to a deep place of depression.
Interesting.
Because I recognized I couldn't do it. Whether I couldn't or didn't want to, or it wasn't God's plan for me, all of that hard work and those years of moving forward toward reaching that idol, which was so important to me growing up, like having a great career, making my own money, having a place for myself, I really was miserable. I was rushing through the job of motherhood. I was barely listening to what my husband was telling me at the end of the day at our dinner table. All I could think about was, oh my gosh, am I going to bed so I could work my PowerPoint presentation for work? Like it was twisted and really imbalanced. And I thank God for those moments of recognizing that my mental health was really going downhill, because it forced me to be like, this is not worth it. And it was a terrifying time for my family, and also a breaking open of sorts for my family. So I did walk away from that career, like literally walked away. I can explain it as being a graceful walk away, but it wasn't very graceful at the time. And with it, this was like 11 years ago. And within that period of self-discovery, there were a lot of things that happened in my own heart. I walked away recognizing that idol could never bring me happiness. By the grace of God, he pointed me in the direction of my faith, which was completely reinvigorated. And I swore, like, during that time, that every single morning from that point moving forward, I would get down on my knees and just say, God, what is your will for my life? What is your will for my life? Like, let that be done. Instead of me dictating where I think my life should be going, what is your will for my life? And the moment my eyes were open to the realization that he was sovereign over it all and that he had good plans for me, like, things started moving in the right direction. They really did. I discovered the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, which I quickly enrolled in, present with my family. Craig's job was able to, like, it took off amazingly because I walked away from a career that was, a good paying career. It's like the year that my life took a complete turn in the other direction. Complete. And I will say, as ugly as those days were, because they were really, really hard, dark days where I walked away from an identity that you're really thinking the world promotes as being the ideal. And I was lost for a while, but I really did trust that God had my best interest, and he knew more about his plan for my life than I did. So I really trusted that truth. And with that trust and just being, like, completely committed to that truth, things have really turned out to be more beautiful in my life than I could have ever imagined. So then I will say the last 10 years have been like, they've blown by, but it's been 10 years of 2 additional children in my life, which honestly could never have happened if I stayed where I was, because my body and my mind were not nearly healthy enough to really be a host for more children. They weren't. And the business that I have, I'm a holistic nutrition coach, has evolved dramatically based on the needs of the community. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. That's where I am today. I have 3 children. I have my own business. I have an amazing family and an amazing community of friends and sisters and a faith community, which are my roots in my life. And so a lot of people are like, what's your 5-year plan, 10-year plan? I don't know. I have some general idea where I'd like it to go. But again, I really just trust God's plan and timing with everything, because he's been so good to me for these last 10 years. And that doesn't mean that, like, the last 10 years have been complete smooth sailing, lots of trials and lots of challenges, but through them, I've discovered so much more about myself. So I think, does that sort of sum up my journey?
Yes, for sure. And I really appreciate your awareness, because people, when they get to that deep, dark place that you mentioned, some people might just crumble, but that you were very aware of, and I'm sure it took time, and I'm not discounting the fact that it wasn't a major, struggle, but that you were able to pull from that and listen, as you mentioned, to God, or, to yourself, and figure out that this wasn't working, and had the courage to walk away from something. And because so many people don't do that. So I hope that the people that are listening can understand that there are going to be those moments of struggle and scary moments, and that you are an inspiration to all those women that, beautiful things can happen on the other side. And so, speaking of the beautiful things, I thought that it would be interesting to really focus kind of now on how you really have found and built a life that you absolutely love. And again, not discounting that there could be times when there are things that you're not absolutely loving, but that you have something and you're building something that really lights you up. So what really had to change within you, within your life, to allow you to live this life that you're really enjoying now?
Okay, that's a good question. So what allowed me to live this life?
Either allowed you, or what changed within you, within your home, within your life that, you know, kind of allowed you to now live this life that you're loving and that you're building this business that lights you up.
Okay, love that question. So I will say a couple things. Number one, it was a refocus. I think the truth is we really live in a really difficult society that puts a lot of pressure on us, whether it be as women or children or even a man. Any one of us has an immense amount of pressure. And I think the pressure has grown since the advent of like a ton of social media, right? Mm-hmm. And I think our world portrays that happiness comes from a successful career, being able to take care of yourself and being independent, yet also having, you know, friends and a family to rely upon, thinking that really true happiness comes from beauty, which stems from the outside. We like to say beauty lies within. However, let's be honest, everything about our world today is how many likes do you get and how many, you know, super pictures with filters can you employ on your own face to make you look younger and better. So it's like this juxtaposing idea of like, no, really love yourself from within. Know that you are valued. Know that you have amazing potential. However, you're only as important and liked as the number of likes and comments on your page. So we're like, well, which one is it? And I think what allowed me to change was recognizing that I really did try all that. Like I tried to have everything the world said was important, and it didn't lead to inner joy or peace. Mm-hmm. And when I literally, it's like this zooming back and pushing away of what the world says is important, and then saying, all right, God, you created me in your image. I am, you know, made in your image. So I have to have some good gifts and skills that I can use instead of trying to create a life that I think would be ideal. Like help me discover what it is that you built me for. Mm-hmm. So it's really like just graying out everything around me and accepting what I'm good at. Like I always wanted to be like the next salesperson or the next leader. And once I got rid of that and said, no, like I use my hands. I'm very dynamic. I might not use big words. And I really care more about people than events, and just accepting all these things about myself. It allowed me to discover what it was that I would love to do with my life. So I really think that there was this sense of, I need to do something more important. I went to an Ivy League. I got to do that. Guess what? I freaking chop vegetables and cook meals for people. And I'm so freaking happy. Like, I think I put this pressure on myself that I had to make big changes in the world. And what's so beautiful is I do make change, but I do it at the smaller level. Like I open my eyes every day and I'm like, God, let me receive whatever you have to give me today. And let me be a light to whatever you put in my path today. And I am able to make change in this world, but doing it on a smaller scale, and all those little small scale changes add up.
For sure.
Whereas I thought they had to be big. So the first thing I did was like zoom away from the world says that what is important. And I really put my focus on, well, how did God create me? Like, what am I good at? And can I make a life from this? So that was the first thing I did. And then the second thing I recognized was some things for me take a lot longer than other things. And there are things that are important to me that might not be important to the next person. Or there are things that are important to the next person that are important to me. And so I looked at sort of like the things that in my life that were important, and I had to build time in for. And they have dramatically changed from what they were when I was not married and not with children, right? Back at that time, it was like, I have to work out every day. I have to work 10 hours a day. I have to plow through lunch because it'll look great to my colleagues if I skip lunch and work, right? Now I'm like, what's important to me? I don't do it every day. I look at my life as a week, in a week at a whole, if that makes sense. And I say, okay, well, I definitely need movement in my life because it's good for my body and my mind. I'm not going to work out every day. If it's 4 days a week, that makes me happy. I also know that I need to get good sleep. Well, it's hard for me to get good sleep on Sundays and Mondays because those are my busiest work days. So I said, okay, I'll sort of sacrifice there. But Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, I got to go to bed early. I make a big commitment to work on my marriage because I think if Craig and I are solid, then our kids could see what a solid family looks like. So I make time for that. So I might say no to the next volunteer board meeting, but I will say yes to a date with my husband. I think spending time with my kids is incredibly important, but not to the point where we're codependent. So I have sitters come in and I do say no to them so I can take care of myself. So that's it. Like I will say to the person that's listening here, don't base your agenda or schedule on the next person's that seems to be successful. Take an assessment of what matters to you and what is important in this season. I say season. A season could be a month. A season could be a quarter. A season could be a year. But in this season of my life, when I have little kids at home and I'm mid-40s and I know that I could age quickly or I could age gracefully. So I'm like, eating well, exercising here and there, and getting good sleep are really important to me in this season of life. And so are other things like my marriage and my faith. And so I build time in. So it's a really big, and I check in frequently because those seasons change. So really assessing what is important right now as a priority in your life and not comparing it to the next person's is so key.
There were so many important points to kind of highlight. The first is the acceptance of what makes sense for you right now. And also the importance of not comparing. Comparing is like the 100% thief of joy. I mean, I try to teach that to my kids. I try to teach that to the kids. But grown adults don't even know that now. And that is, you need to focus on your own lane because the only thing you have control of is your own happiness. And if you are spending all this time and energy on doing, like you said, what you think other people want you to do or what you think you should be doing, at the end of the day, you're not going to be happy.
All right. Well, the reason I'm laughing, and all you who are listening cannot see it, I just laughed because Josie is my 5-year-old. And I made a comment. I think I was saying something about my sister who lives in London, and she lives this like crazy life where she like goes to Dubai one weekend and Brussels the next. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so jelly. Like, I'm not really, okay, there's a difference between jealousy and envy. Jealousy is saying, sheesh, that would be really nice to have that. Envy is when you covet what somebody else has and it leads to a bitterness between you and that person. So there's a difference, but I will say, so jelly of your life right now. And Josie, my 5-year-old, turns to me and she goes, Ma, jealousy will rot your bones. I was like, yes, girl, yes. She learned it on VeggieTales.
I love her. She's so cute.
It's the best. All right. So yeah, it's a lesson we will have to remember for the rest of our lives. It doesn't you don't get married and all of a sudden become secure. No. You don't get married and all of a sudden not care what the scale says. You don't get married and all of a sudden really just be like, I'm just so beautiful because God created me. No, this is a hard world we live in. And my advice on that one, because I practice it every day. I wake up and I'm like, we could choose to be in a state of comparisons and frustration, or we could choose to be grateful. So it's seriously, every day we're waiting at the bus stop and I'm like, girls, 3 things you're grateful for. And just say 3 things. And it's really amazing what having a posture of gratitude could do to push away those negative thoughts. So that's one way I start my day.
100%. And choice, we always have a choice. And I think that people forget that they have the choice. And so are you going to choose, like you said, to fill it with gratitude, to fill it with positive thoughts, to fill it with your healthy foods, healthy choices, or are you going to choose to constantly compare yourself and have those negative feelings and fuel your body with the junk food? I mean, the choice is yours. We all have that same choice. And then I also appreciated how you are so intentional with scheduling the things that are important to you and that you're aware of, kind of your core values and that you make time for that. So can you kind of speak a little bit more to that, how you really discovered what was so important and what fuels you? Sure.
Okay, so how I discovered, I think at the end of the day, every one of us is really wired differently, right? We just really are. For some people, they're night owls. Other people their best hours are in the morning. You know, some people really get motivated and filled up by spending time alone in nature, and other people need to be around others. And I think I really just have discovered a lot about myself. What I recognize is I get my best work done in the morning. So my day starts at night. I recognize that for me to feel productive, to lower my anxiety, I have to focus on the nighttime. And what that's translated to really is like building a bedtime routine. We can read about it all we want. We can talk about it to our children all we want. But it really is important to me. I do not do well with little sleep. I think some people do better than others on less sleep, but everybody from your gut to your brain health, we all need good sleep. It's a way to like rest all of our systems in our body. And I recognize that I need to turn it off at night. So the question was, how did I discover what was important to me and how do I make time for it? I realize the best days I have are those when I sleep well, right? So I make sure I turn off social media. And there are times where you have to compromise and sacrifice on things. I'm rarely on social media. I have found that it's a time sucker for me. And I'm not saying that to judge other people or shame other people that are on it a lot. Some people use it for business. Other people use it for motivation. For me, it's usually a time sucker. So I just have really steered clear of that to make more space for reading. I read at night on an actual archaic book where you turn the pages.
Love it.
Because it quiets my mind and it puts me to sleep. I have discovered that I really love wine and having drinks at the end of the night. However, I've recognized I need to have a balance and only do it when like it's a special occasion during the week or the weekends, because my body and my mind need that really good sleep at night to be present with my kids the next day, to get up for that workout that I'm doing a couple days a week, to have the focus. So it's just over time, I realized my good days were the days where I slept well, didn't drink, exercised a little, and drank a lot of water, right? So I think over time, I just ask people, look back. What are the days that you feel best? What did you do during those days? Try to recreate them. And what I started doing years ago was putting it in my calendar. I know it sounds silly, but once you have children, your time is not your own, right? Like I had best intentions last night to go to a meeting that would have helped the community from 7:30 to 8:30. And guess what? My husband got stuck on a plane in Colorado. My daughter added an activity for sports. So my time was not mine anymore, right? And so as the day goes on, my time for me decreases typically. So I do try to get things done in the morning. But as I was saying, your time really decreases as your own when you have kids. And I recognized that I had to start putting everything on a calendar, everything. So whether it's literally something to do, like meet with a client, exercise, build my shopping list, call my sister, everything goes on my calendar. And then I even have to put on my calendar, block this hour on Thursday to plan for next week and to just sit and think. I have to build time because it's my disposition to just go. So I have to put time on there to just stop. And what that allows me to do is I think most of us are running and our minds feel busy. We're just always busy. We're busy because there is so much coming in at us in our inboxes, demands from the kids, friends. There's so many opportunities to go out and grab drinks with friends. So if I instead take everything that's on my mind and plant it on the calendar, then I look there and I'm like, nope, can't do that, because we only have so much time in a day. So you mentioned the word intention before. I get really anxious if I feel myself floundering and jumping onto a moving train day after day. I feel a lot better about myself if there's some intentionality there. So what I will do is things on the calendar that are on my mind so that then my mind has time to listen to the conversation that I'm in or to focus on the client that I'm with, because I trust that I've put it somewhere and I allocated time for it. Now there's other thing, and I think I learned this when I was at Johnson & Johnson, that there are 4 categories, maybe there's more than 4, but in my mind, I'm there are things that are important and priority. There are things that are important, but not a priority. There's things that are priority, but take 2 minutes of time. And I literally think through things. I'm if they're not that important, I put it at the end of my list. And if they are important, then it's got to happen today. So I live by my calendar. So I have a growing calendar, But then each night when I'm in my bed at night is when I build my daily writing out. So I have everything thrown there for the week. And then each night I just make a to-do list that's just about the next day. And I literally make blocks because I like to compartmentalize in my mind. Right now I'm focusing on my sister. Then I'm focusing on my client. Then I'm focusing on my kids' homework. Then I'm focusing on my community group and my faith. But if I'm not smart enough to just wing it. I'm just not. My brain doesn't work that way. I have to be very black and white, structured, written down.
Well, you know yourself, and it's important that by time blocking and being so intentional, you're able to prioritize yourself. And like you mentioned before, so we have so much thrown at us, busy moms. You have 3 kids. I have 2 kids. It doesn't even matter how many kids you have. That as a mother, our just common nature is to put everyone else's needs in front of our own. And, there's that old saying, like on an airplane, put your oxygen mask on before helping others. And a lot of times mothers forget about that. But unless our cup is full, unless we have taken some time for ourselves, even if it's just a moment, we really need to focus on putting ourselves back in the center of our universe so then we can easily manage everything that comes to us. And it sounds like you're really doing that. So,
I mean, I try, but yeah.
Right. It's all work in progress, right?
Totally. It's a work in progress and it's a reset every day. Yesterday, Maya had a tutor over and I disappeared. And she's like, Chrissy, I'm done. And I was like, oh, sorry. I'm laying on my back in the basement, opening my hands, just deep breathing because I'm about to lose it.
Right, but you knew that you needed to take, you had, again, enough of that awareness that you needed to take that moment. You needed to take advantage of those pockets of moments when we need to reset.
All right, so I hope that answered your question.
No.
And everybody's priorities are different. You did ask, how did you discover what your priorities were? I think it's really different for everybody. And when I meet with clients, I always say, look, there is this circle of life that we can look at together. And do you remember this? Did I do this with you? There's different categories. I think there's 12 slices of a whole pie. Mm-hmm. And you got your finances, you got your education, you got your creativity, your joy, your faith, your career, your home environment, your home relationships, your social life. And then you go through this exercise and say, well, which one of these is really causing me stress today? Mm-hmm. Right? I recognize it right away. I don't have to build the pie anymore. I recognize there are some weeks where I'm I don't have time to exercise. It's just one of those weeks and that's okay. Until I start to feel completely off. And then I'm all right, time to shift gears. I've got to let up and work and just exercise. So it's constantly shifting. But that's how I prioritize. I always say what do I feel is causing the most amount of angst or anxiety right now? Very infrequently is it my social calendar is really not enough and I need to build more in. It's not that. And very infrequently is it, I don't have enough work going on. I feel like that's struggling. No, I typically am I'm stressed because I haven't spent enough time with Craig and we're not communicating. And I could tell we are passing each other like ships in the night. So we got to get a date night on the calendar, right? That, or it's, I got to reset, stop drinking, go to bed early and get back up in the morning and I don't exercise for an hour a day. I've said this to people today, it was 30 minutes. That's what I had today. I try to move most days, but I know sometimes where when I am moving physically, my mind slows down, which is sort of an oxymoron, but I know that there are times where I feel erratic in my brain or when I need to shift the focus and start getting on the treadmill more. But above all of it, I said before, and this is just my life, I'm speaking about my experiences. I know that my priority each day has to start with God and the prayer that God, what is your will for me today? If I don't do that, then there's these other voices in my mind that say, no, do what they're doing. Get on social media, go do that. And it just is how I like to prioritize. God first, then my immediate family. That's always it. God first, my immediate family. And then there's the rest of the community that I hope to serve. And my prayers always let my eyes be open to whoever it is you need me to serve today. And it's really amazing how prayer is answered. Yeah. Sometimes I just have somebody on my mind and I reach out to them. They're can't believe you just called. I have this thing going on. I want to talk through it. So it's pretty cool. So that's sort of how I prioritize the people in my life. But then as I said before, it's where we're feeling our stress points that we have to scale back, give up on something else and put more priority into that thing that's causing stress.
100%. And it goes back to just being aware. And that is something that I work on with my clients. I call it the wheel of life. You can, there's the full pie, and then you can have different wheels of life that focus just on health and wellness, one that finance, one on relationships. But again, it is at any given moment when you are feeling a little agitation, feel as though you're reacting more, feel like you're less in control, you do need to take that pause and say, okay, what's causing me to do this? And so I guess as we're kind of nearing the end of our conversation, I wanted to step back and focus a little bit, because this is something that you work on with your clients and something that you helped me with. As a busy mom, how do you and also work with your clients on prioritizing eating healthy? Obviously that's a huge conversation. We could have a separate conversation at another time, but just a couple quick tips on how to prioritize that part in our lives.
I think that's good. It's a good question. And I think it's good because it's the crux of what I do with my clients. And I hope that's why I'm finding that the business is successful is I'm very individually focused, right? Or individualistic, I should say. But with every client, I really try to understand their story, her story or his story, I should say. But I really do. I'm like, let's see where you're at today. Let's talk about your day today. Most people are not going to make dramatic shifts and changes in their day-to-day because, as I said, a lot of the clients I work with, many of them, probably 98%, are adults. And they've got other people that they're accountable for, right? So hard to make a whole life shift. So I said, what does your day-to-day look like right now? And then the healthiest thing they could do to improve their eating or lifestyle, I look at the lowest hanging fruit based on their day-to-day, right? And most people, I'll give you an example. The client, my newest client, I could say is what he had to work on, it wasn't even educating him on what's healthy and what's not healthy. It was figuring out how to minimize or reduce his eating out. He was eating out, he was buying lunch every single day, and he was going out with friends probably half of the evenings. So for him, it was like, let's just shift away from eating out. Let's bring lunch to school every day, and you get 2 nights that you go out for dinner. Let's just do this for a month and see how you feel. I don't know if, that's not going to bode well with everybody because some people cook at home all the time, but it's very specific. And for him, he feels great. He's lost 7 pounds. It's amazing when you just don't eat out at every meal, how much better it is for your body, right? For the next person, if they want to eat better, it's something simple. I'm like, don't eat the way I eat, but let's write down what you're eating today. And let's compare that to what we should consume in a day. And wherever the gap is, we pick something. Most people are not getting nearly enough vegetables. They say they are, but then you look at their menu from that day and they're like, sheesh, I am a busy working mom. I grabbed a bar on the way to my, gym class. And then I grabbed like a wrap at lunch. And then I had like a handful of my kids' goldfish. And then I had dinner. So I say, what are you doing in one day? What's your snapshot? Where do we need to be? Most people aren't eating enough veggies. I'm like, just start with that. Start with drinking water and shopping. When you get home from the grocery store or your grocery bags come in from Instacart, wash your produce, chop it up, put it in containers. And if it's there, you might be more willing. So when I chop my kids' fruit every morning, I'm like, pick a breakfast and you're having fruit with it. Whatever fruit's left over, I chop up and leave in a bowl on the counter. And I do the same thing for lunch. They might take baby carrots, they might take cucumbers, they may take some broccoli. Whatever's left over, I chop up, put in a bowl on the counter. And then as I do my day, I just take a grab, because it's sitting out. Right. And I don't want it to go to waste. So that's a very simple tip. It's just take more of the good stuff and it crowds out the junk. That's step one. So.
No, that's very helpful because I think when someone thinks about taking their health and wellness in their own hands, they see this as this massive undertaking. And the fact that you're able to break it down into what is happening today, what can you do, just one snapshot of a day, that it helps to reduce that overwhelm. It's the same thing that I talk about with my clients. Write one new page. It's not, you don't have to write the whole chapter. You don't have to, lose whatever the weight is. It's just small increments can make a big difference. And definitely having the healthy things easy to grab, because we are constantly on the go. And if you're more intentional with what you choose, it definitely is really helpful.
That and write down, because most people will say, I felt really good today. I wish I could do it more often. Whatever that change might be. I'm like, write down what worked. So that when you feel like you're off again, all you have to do is go back and look at what you wrote down. You don't have to call me again. I mean, it's nice. I love clients. However, I'm like, I'm just reminding you of what worked the last time. So we're nearing the end. I don't know. We don't want to bore people. We might even want to do a part 2. I'm just letting you know.
Yes, we definitely will do a part 2. And as we come to the end, I appreciate your openness and sharing all these wonderful tips and allowing people in on your journey. And hopefully they can learn from it, because that's really why I created the Next Chapter community, is for women, mothers to support each other and to learn from each other and understand that the struggles that you might be going through today aren't going to be there forever, and that there are women that have struggled along, some of the same things and are now on the other side. So any other parting, one little gem or something that you want someone to be able to walk away with this conversation having and put it in their back pocket? And remember, Chrissy Davenport told me this.
Let me try to find some really wise words. Last parting gifts. I will just say, you have to believe that you have an immense amount of potential and enough value that can last a lifetime. Everybody questions that. And every one of us was created with potential and value. That's it. That's what I would say. And try to find whatever it is that you were gifted with. And the flip side would be try to see the good and the light in others, because everybody else has it as well.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate all that you have given. And yes, stay tuned. We may do a part 2. Thanks, Chrissy.
Fabulous. Well, thank you for doing this. All right. Love you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Next Chapter Podcast. Join our community for more in-depth conversations with other inspiring women. Follow us on your favorite podcast app, and don't forget to share this episode with anyone ready to write their next chapter. Please leave a review if you love listening to the Next ChaptHER Podcast. As a thank you, Andrea will share your review at the beginning of a future episode. For personalized guidance from Andrea Hecht, visit fullyinformedlife.com and schedule your complimentary discovery session today. Andrea provides individual and group coaching, helping you uncover your next chapter. Now's your chance. Step up and reimagine life today with the Next ChaptHER community by your side.